people get pretty worried and antsy.
Could be, maybe
down
that's
to
part
the
of the
last
strategy.
minute,
Yeah.
People think that all these big bucks are coming that way, and, that more bucks are gonna come, and then, really, we get right down to the wire.
Yeah, so that might be.
That's how people think about this thing. But it is the holidays, so that's kind of,
I think also we're in such a challenging fundraising environment right now with all the political people
Yes.
that are going nuts on everybody. It's just really difficult.
Okay, we're about ready to
Yep.
start. Okay. Good evening. The regular October 15th meeting of the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission is called to order. Patrick, would you take the roll call, please?
Sure. Chair Clark?
Present?
Vice Chair McCann?
Present.
Commissioner Baker is absent.
Haven't heard.
Actually, no, I haven't heard from him. Sorry. Commissioner Flanagan?
Here.
Commissioner Friedman?
Here.
Commissioner Futterman?
here,
Commissioner Garrett?
here,
Commissioner Gauthier is absent today. Commissioner Goins?
Present.
Commissioner Miller?
here.
And Commissioner Santora is going to be absent today as well.
Okay. And so we have a quorum.
We do.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the acceptance of the agenda. It was emailed to the commissioners and posted last Thursday, October 10th, per city policy. Is there a motion to accept the agenda? Okay, thank you. And a second? Second? Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay. All in favor of accepting the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Passed unanimously. Okay. Then we move on to city manager and staff comments. Patrick?
All right. So I just got a few things today. One is just some notes about the council meetings on September 18th. The trash can purchase was approved for downtown. So those are in the process of being ordered. I did talk with the subcommittee, the Scour subcommittee, about the signage that might be associated with those. And so we're working out the signage question and may have to go before council for that. So we're working on that. October 2nd, that was, there were a couple of mentions there, one about EV charging and making sure that we're doing all we can to install EV charging stations by Councilmember Middleton. Councilmember Holstage asked for a discussion about the climate action plan or climate emergency resolution. And then there was a comment from a member of the public about the no dogs on trail signs, citing some past report about the habitat zone for the bighorn sheep not extending all the way down the mountains. And so they asked council to investigate whether or not dogs could be allowed on certain portions of the trails. We have contacted CVAG about that. We do not believe that that is valid under the plan, and so we are working up a response to that for council for the next meeting. So Marcus Fuller is working on that. So that should be going forward, I believe, for the second reading in terms of the ordinance associated with that at the next council meeting. October 23rd, council meeting coming up. We will have the Desert Protection Act resolution that you guys voted on at the last meeting. I believe that's going to be on the consent calendar. I will also be doing a brief presentation at the beginning of the meeting on SB 1383, which is the new organics waste management regulation that's under development. So I'll have a few words to say about that to start to get council up to speed on what's coming on that front. The new version of the act new version of the regulation was issued October 2nd. Comments are due, I think, at the end of this week to Cal Recycle, and there were some significant changes in it. Anyway, so I think things are still moving forward in the same direction for that particular regulation. So we'll expect to see lots of changes from that. The November 6th meeting will be the energy code discussion. So we will have all of the building ordinance code changes presented to the council, and then we will have some sort of conversation around the energy code that will be part of that package. We will also have the solar zoning ordinance probably coming back before the council to review and approve, hopefully. And I think that was it in terms of the council meetings. Just a couple of notes. I did meet with Cultural Center staff from Agua Caliente, and so we are trying to coordinate a little bit more closely on the various things that we're doing on the sustainability side and the things that they will be doing in terms of the cultural center and things like that. It sounds like they're already thinking about lots of the things that we are too, so I am pretty confident that they will have a fairly sustainable design in their operations. They did suggest that if we were interested in having a conversation with the tribe about the arena, that now is the time to do that. So if there are things that we would want to offer to a discussion around the arena, that we should try to maybe coordinate with the mayor and see if we could get on an agenda to talk to them about it, just go through some general things that we would like to see them do. So anyways, that's something for the commission to think about doing in the near future.
Is a waste collection strategy too small potatoes?
I don't think so. I think that all the things like that we are putting into place in the public realm, so things like that, things like the plastics use, single-use plastics, all that stuff, we would like to probably give them a heads up about the Dark Skies initiative if we're going in a certain direction. He did mention to me that they are including in, I think, their contracts or something like that, that everything has to be done per city ordinances as well. So again, if we're passing ordinances, then they should be mandated to comply with that as well. So anyway, so hopefully that will come to pass, but it would be good to give them a heads up about what the stuff that we're thinking of so that they can plan it into their design if they can.
One thing that may be a little bit ahead in the agenda is relates to something that we'll be talking about regarding the climate action plan, but that is parking. And I know the city is going to be having discussions with the tribe about parking, but also from a carbon footprint point of view, that can be added in.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing on mass transit or anything like that in terms of servicing that arena. Yep. Okay.
Patrick, just a
Yep.
quick reminder too about getting together with the city planners for the new park.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. The other thing I did was I met with the convention center staff, and I think I did that after our last meeting. So the convention center has been, I guess, taken over by the new company who's going to be managing it. So their sustainability people were here and meeting with the convention center staff, and we had a really good conversation about the kinds of things that they wanted to put in place. They asked me to put together some sort of best practices for them to think about when they're getting business in. I did tell them and advocate that they should have a zero waste meeting package like some of the other facilities do here in town. And so anyway, so we'll have some more conversations with them about that. And so I think that was a good sign. We did a walkthrough of their facility as well. So lots of improvements that they could make in terms of signage around their recycling and trash bins, and actually just using reusable ware as opposed to disposable ware. They've got tons of reusable stuff that they could use, and so I think that they just need to use that more often. So anyway, so ongoing conversations with them, I think they were very interested, and the company AEG is very interested in that stuff and tracking it and sharing it with their other facilities. So anyway, so that was a good sign and good conversation. So, and I think, let's see. So I don't have much to report on business cards or branding. I did make some tweaks to the design based on the comments that we got back from last time. So it's a little lighter in the blues and greens, and the butterfly changed. So then just a reminder, we've got a 1 PS brown bag session coming up on Thursday. And sounds like we've gotten a few responses to that, so I think that we'll get a fair number of people there. Let's see, Commissioner Miller, Commissioner McCann, Commissioner Clark. David, you're going to be there? Okay. And we'll have somebody from Desert Water Authority there and Palm Springs Disposal there. And so hopefully we will have a good and robust, broad-ranging discussion. So, anyway, so
What
come
time is it and what time is it?
12 to 1:30.
12 to 1:30.
So, all right. And Commissioner Garrett was asking me if we could just take a quick poll if anybody would like to participate in the Pride Parade as a group. That was the question, correct? If the commission would like to go as a group in the Pride Parade, anybody interested in that? So,
Like a float?
No float, it's 1 mile.
Right.
So they did sort of joke, and it was like, well, you're green, so let's not use a car. But it's a slow 1 mile. But they would be thrilled, and the only requirement is that you wear white pants or shorts or a skirt, and you could wear logo T-shirts, whatever you want, comfortable shoes. But please just come out. It'll be 50 years, and also all 50 neighborhoods in Palm Springs will be represented. So we want the best turnout possible and for the community to come together, so.
I'm already in it.
all right.
I am too, so I'm thinking if the two floats are a sufficient time and distance apart, I might be able to wheel back and do this if it's.
Yeah, I could do the same thing depending on where, I usually march with Lambda Legal, so depending on where we'll be, I can join you after that.
If you can, and if I may go ahead, if you need to drop out at the last minute, but if I can present all the commissioners together as a possibility, that would be wonderful.
Is it this Sunday?
Sunday the 3rd, starts at 10 a.m., it runs about an hour, and they ask for staging to be there between 8 and 8:30, and covered parking will be available at Desert Regional.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right. Okay. So we'll get you more details about that so that everybody can be in the right place at the right time. And then actually one last thing that I did want to mention, I did go to a food waste reduction workshop that was put on by a private consultant who actually works here in town and does consulting all over the country though. And he did an awesome job, and there were about, I would say 25 participants there from some of the bigger hotels. But anyway, we'll probably be bringing him back to do more of those as we get into SB 1383 and advocate for more food waste reduction. So that was a good find. So I think that's all on my front.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then, the next item on the agenda is public comments. This time is for members of the public to address the Sustainability Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission. The commission values your comments, but pursuant to the Brown Act, cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are assigned for each speaker. Is there anybody here who would like to make public comments? Please come up to the table.
And just a reminder for folks in the public and also the commissioners, talking to your microphones and push the button so that the green light appears.
And please state your name.
My name is Peter Mayetta, and I'm running for Palm Springs City Council in District 2. I just wanted to come and introduce myself to you formally tonight. I have a pretty grassroots campaign. I am not a political insider. I have a lot of good experience that I think would benefit the City Council. I spent 20 years in financial services, where I ran marketing for not all of those 20 years, but many of them, marketing for Union Bank Investment Services for all of their brokerage products and all their bank deposit retirement products. After that, I had a small business, and I understand the needs of getting things done in a small business and handling multi-million-dollar budgets for the bank and families, and keeping, income coming in and keeping people employed. I have many different platform issues, but the thing that really I wanted to talk the most about was how I have canvassed our entire district for the past several months since April. I have been to every single door, and I've spoken to about physically spoken to about 1,500 people. And a lot of the people have given me very insightful feedback on the city, and they've helped me shape my platform. And they've also mentioned that sustainability is a very important issue to them, as it is to me. I mean, we all need to share and live in this world, and it needs to be a place that's healthy for all of us and conducive to life here. So if elected, I just want you to know that you would have my full support. I think that this is an invaluable commission. Other than that, my platforms are the revitalization of the North End and bringing jobs into Palm Springs. That can be done by tweaking some of the zoning there on some of the lots, and then they could be sold. New businesses would come in. In theory, people would be hired, and money would come into our economy and taxes, which would be great. A beautification of the North End as well. I would also be very interested in seeing energy technologies come here for us attracting them in any which way we can possibly do that, because it would also help with another thing. It would be, full-time residents coming here, more employers. It would help in the summer months when it's warm and, our vacation destination sort of drops off the map for a few months. I am very interested in homelessness and affordable housing. I think the city is doing a great job with homelessness. Actually, I have nothing to complain about that. I think the wraparound services and the idea of, treating one person at a time to make sure that their issues are addressed with, whether it be drug addiction or domestic violence or whatever it is they're fleeing. You can only break the cycle of homelessness one person at a time. Affordable housing is very important to me because in talking to a lot of people in District 2, which is a working class district, many people are in fear that with the softening economy, housing might become difficult staying where they are. But if we can build more multi-unit housing for everyone here, then I think that, we have a better chance of people who work here will be able to live here in Palm Springs, which would be wonderful. And I guess that's my time.
Okay, thank you.
One last thing, I have to go to a meeting after this, so thank you for your time, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Red mean it's off. Yeah, there you go. Give us off.
Hi, my name is Bob Ballard, and I'm the new co-facilitator of the Courageous Resistance Climate Crisis Committee. And I'm really happy to be here with you guys. I really want to pledge our support to you. You've done an amazing job here. I'm relatively new to the area. I'm originally from Boston, but I've been living in the desert for the last 5 to 6 years. And I really am impressed with the plans that you guys have made and the inventories that you've done, and I want to support that you update that inventory. My main interest in climate change is the crisis aspect of it. Like many of you, I have children and grandchildren, and I want them to live in a clean world, and I think we have to raise the stakes. I think the alarm level is not high enough, and even though you've done a great job, there's so much more to be done. And I want to support you in doing that. There's so many people that are at risk right now. There's so many changes that are accelerating so fast. We've already lost 1/3 of the desert birds in the desert here already. So it's very important that we, move ahead with what you're doing. So we want to support you. The other thing I wanted to talk about is we're having, well, not just us, but many groups in the Valley, Democrats of the Desert, a bunch of other people, we're having a major climate crisis forum event on November 9th in Coachella at the Veterans Park. And it's 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And we've got some speakers coming that are climate crisis type people, some people from the Environmental Committee of the State Central Party, the Democratic Party. And we've invited several other people, but Garcia, Dr. Ruiz is supposed to come. So we'd like to have as many people as possible come there, and we're going to have, one of the things we're trying to really do is to get the children involved, and because it's their future, it's their life. And so, we're inviting some of the students to come and speak at this event as well. And I think it's going to be very interesting for a lot of people. There's so many things that they are dealing with, and that's why they had, you probably know about the recent climate crisis strike that went on. And we'd like to see more involvement by them and parent-teacher organizations and so forth in trying to, raise the alarm level. The problem with this issue is cognitive dissonance. All of us are used to living the way we've lived, especially old folks like me. So it's very hard to think about what the world's going to look like, even if we take all the mitigation steps we can take right now. So this isn't a question of, as you know, it's not maybe or if, it's a question of how much can we mitigate the damage that's already been done. So I really thank you for the time you've given me here today, and I want you to know that Courageous Resistance will be behind you 100%. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next.
Good evening, Commissioners and staff. My name is Kim Floyd. I live in Palm Desert. I speak for the Sierra Club as the Conservation Chair for the group that covers this geography out here. Bob Ballard mentioned the event that's coming up November 9. The Sierra Club is one of the co-sponsors of that event, along with Courageous Resistance and the Democrats of the Desert. And I will make sure that we get flyers to each of you through whatever mechanism is available. The Sierra Club strongly supports recognizing that we have a climate crisis and that there are opportunities at the local level to do something about it. And we need to accept that responsibility at the local level, in our opinion. And as Bob mentioned, we agree, I certainly agree that Palm Springs and this group have been leaders in our Coachella Valley in these kinds of issues, and it puts more weight on you and the work that you do in your city council. And so I'm in Palm Desert working with that city council, trying to encourage them to do some of the things that we already see you doing here in Palm Springs. And so we definitely try to leverage off the work that you do. I would also mention that to the extent you and your city council has the opportunity to influence other agencies, other leaders, water agencies, school boards, all of these agencies have the opportunity to make a difference as it relates to this climate crisis that we have. And each agency will have a different set of things that they can tackle. Different, certainly maybe from a city, a water agency has a different set of issues that they could take on. So we encourage that. The Sierra Club has done a lot of work in this area, and we stand ready to provide assistance to the extent that we can. And so we're open. I would be the contact person, and I look forward to working with you if this group determines that to be appropriate. And again, thank you for the time this evening, and thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you. And if you'd like to have flyers sent to us, you can send them to Patrick.
Yes. Yep.
What time is it on that Sunday?
I'm sorry?
1 o'clock.
Looks like that's it for public comment. Thank you all. The next item is the meeting minutes from the September 17th meeting. They were emailed to you and posted on Thursday per city policy. Is there a motion to accept the meeting minutes? Commissioner?
I'll make the motion. I did have one very small comment that I've already relayed to Daniel, so
Okay.
subject to that comment,
Okay.
I move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second? Commissioner Gollings, okay? Discussion then? The comment that you made?
Oh, sorry. On the solar ordinance, it was approved unanimously by all 10 as opposed to all 8 of the commissioners, because there were 10 of us who were present that day, at that point. So Daniel has noted the change, and he'll make that. So 8 becomes 10 in
Okay.
that section.
Okay. So, all in favor of accepting the minutes with that one change, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes accepted unanimously. Oh, I'm sorry. One abstention from Commissioner Fetterman. Okay. Then we move on to the recycling report.
Good evening. I'll be very brief this evening. First, I wanted to remind everyone that our shredding and e-waste event is upcoming this Saturday from 8 to noon in the front parking lot of City Hall. We're having that in conjunction with Palm Springs Disposal's fall cleanup, so we should have a pretty good turnout. My understanding is that we've had a lot of interest shown in that event, so hopefully we'll have a good turnout. The other thing I wanted to share with you is that Patrick and I went out and visited about a dozen businesses. We started with the list of the non-compliant people with AB 341, which is the commercial recycling, as well as 1826, which is the organics recycling. So I concentrated on AB 341 and Patrick concentrated on the organics portion, and I don't know if you'll want to comment on that or not. But the responses are pretty much what you would imagine. Some said that they weren't aware of it. Some said that they hadn't seen the letter. My understanding is that there were 2 mailings of the letter that we took with them and presented them. The first one was sent to the business address, and the second one was sent to the property owners or the business owners. So the second one should have been more effective. But that doesn't mean that the clerks or the non-management personnel are aware of what's going on. But we did make contact with them. We shared another letter with them and asked them to forward it to corporate or whomever they had to share it with. Some seemed interested, some not so interested, but it was just pretty much the run-of-the-mill responses that you would expect. We're going to go out tomorrow again. I don't know, are you going out? Patrick and I are going out tomorrow, and then Roy and I are going to go out Thursday morning. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So I think the only other observation I had was I was surprised by the number of levels, even in smaller organizations. Like there's the owner, there's the manager, there's the workers, and so all those have to play some part in this. And so that was interesting to me. And then the other challenge that I think we have with this issue, and I think that we're going to have with the single-use plastics and some other sorts of things as we go down with SB 1383, is that it's kind of getting people out of their immediate space and having them think about these things. Because when you approach people in a lot of ways, when they're doing their work, they feel like that's a distraction and they just want to get back to it. And so there's this balance that we're going to have to try to figure out in terms of getting the people that know the most and are in the right place to do something, but also getting them in a space, in a mental space that they can actually engage with us and actually do something. So I think that's going to be a challenge that we run into going forward.
So just so you know the mechanics of it, what we do is, or what Patrick and I did is we had a form. We went out, we made our presentation, spoke with the people on site, and then we fill out the form, any deficiencies they have. Space was a big one, especially downtown, because it's an older building stock. So we have to be creative in what we do with toters and space and this one restaurant we went into, I don't think they even could have put another container inside. It was very, very crowded in there. But those are the kinds of issues that you just have to work through. And the letter contains contact information for Palm Springs Disposal, and they'll be able and willing to go out and help them in any way, waste audit, anything that they need to try to make this more successful. Then after we get done canvassing the people, we take the forms and give them to Palm Springs Disposal, and they put it on their spreadsheet. The reason we do that is so we can keep track of who we've contacted and report that to the state, because the state is very anxious that we contact everyone and approach everyone on this list, and at least we've made the effort.
Cookies. Seriously.
Bring them food.
Yeah.
Yeah. That might be a good incentive.
I was wondering if you could repeat the date and time for the E-Shred event.
Oh, 8 to noon.
8 to noon
Yeah.
in Saturday at the in the parking lot here
Right
in the front?
right in
Okay.
the front parking lot.
Then my second question was, these compliance letters, do they come from PSDS or do they come from the state?
No, they come from the city.
From the city?
Right.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, and they actually had a really good response this year, so I think we're down to 140 or so, and I think that's actually a pretty good number compared to previous years.
We started with 142, and I tried to get a hold of Myra to see if we'd had any response from the 16 sites that we had been visited, and I wasn't able to get a hold of her, but it certainly is better than not approaching them.
Yeah.
And so you went to 12, and I was just curious about the sort of number of compliance letters that went out versus the total number in this population.
I think about 800 letters went out. Yeah, so quite a few responded.
And it's good in another way because we found one location that was listed, and there's no way that they could produce recycling. But these are the kinds of things that we're working through, and we'll clean up the list, and next year will be even better than we are this year. Okay,
Any other questions for Gary?
thank you.
At this point, I'd like to ask if we might make a change in the sequence of the agenda. We have Councilmember Holstage here, and she's interested in participating in the discussion on climate action plan, and Patrick had suggested that we might discuss the single-use plastics draft ordinance while she's here as well. So if it's okay to skip over old business and go to new business?
Sure.
Is there consensus that we can do that? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Welcome.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here in front of you.
So the first item that we have under new business is the review of key elements of single-use plastics draft ordinance. And Patrick sent out a memo to all the commissioners about that and made a request that certain information be provided. So I'll turn it over to Patrick to start the discussion.
So before I go to the text of the draft ordinance, I did want to remind folks, if you maybe forgot to get back to me, if you would like to reach out to some of these businesses to survey them about their single-use plastics, go ahead and raise your hand or let me know so that I can include you and give you a package. I've got packages here if you want to do that. Excellent. And so we've got about 300 or so that we wanted to contact. So anyway, so I'll give you a list, and you can either call them, visit them, whatever's most convenient. But I think I've got phone numbers for most of them if we need to. So that's great. We've got two other Roy's doing a batch, and then we've got two other volunteers from some of the other commissions. So anyway, so that's on its way. And so the other, I think that's all I wanted to say about that. All right. So in terms of the draft ordinance, at the last meeting, we talked about some of the key elements, and so I shared those with you at the last meeting, and in particular, our focus on reuse. And so one of the things that we have learned, especially over the summer, is that a lot of cities are actually just moving to a reuse model, emphasizing reuse as opposed to just banning certain types of plastics. And so we're trying to explore that and figure out the right language for that. And so I think it's a big shift, but I think it's an important one for two reasons. One is because again, disposables are not the answer at all. And as we're seeing more information about SB 1383 and how that's going to be enforced, unless we get some great treatment system on the back end, those compostable materials that we're advocating people switch to are just going to end up in the trash and actually going to contribute more to our problem of managing organics on the other end. So anyway, so I think there's a lot of things that are intertwined here and coming together. And so again, this focus on reuse is really important, and we want to make sure that we're emphasizing that as much as we can. And so to that end, what we've done with the ordinance text is really started out with this requirement for at least some businesses to move to reusable materials for all in-house dining. And so that's really the first point that I wanted to chat with you guys about a little bit more. When we talked about it at the subcommittee level, I expressed this tension that I have of, if we make it voluntary, I don't know how many people are going to comply. If we make it mandatory, then do we have to have all of these exceptions that exempt people out because they're of a certain size? And so what I did was I just kind of took a look around and was going to a bunch of restaurants and counting chairs and looking around. And so it seems like everybody that has 50 chairs or more pretty much does reusable ware. And so that requirement should be out there and easy to comply with. It's all the folks that are under that where it gets really gray. And so, so making that voluntary or somehow encouraging that in a different way is something that I put into the current draft text. That 50 seats is totally arbitrary, so I wouldn't invest too much in that, and I won't be offended if you're concerned by that. So anyway, so I just tried to put some sort of cutoff so that we wouldn't have to have all these exemptions. Most of the other cities that are moving this direction have like a size limitation. So if it's 1,000 square feet, then you're exempt, or if you can show hardship. Or if you absolutely can't install a dishwasher or have access to a dishwashing service is the other sort of caveat there. So again, I think I'm open to how we frame that and how we state that in the ordinance. And so would love to maybe get your thoughts a little bit more about what you're feeling about that. Make it all mandatory. Let's be bold. Whatever it may be. So certainly interested in your thoughts too, because I thought about this as well. So anyway, I'll open it up for discussion about that point right now. So
I have one thought, and I got both my trash bills for San Francisco and my trash bills for here. For a 96-gallon bin, I pay $51.50 in Palm Springs, and I pay $239.50 in San Francisco. So I don't know if pricing and disposal of trash plays into it at all, or if individual restaurants pay for that. I mean, San Francisco is penalizing me because I have a big bin because I have 2 units that share it. But still, it's astonishing what the differences are, and I don't know if that would play into this at all for business owners.
Yeah, there have been some ordinance language that I've seen about the relationship of pricing for waste materials as opposed to compostables and other recyclables. So I think that's something we could look at as well.
Patrick, I guess my first comment on the 50 number is that it seems like it would be easier for a smaller establishment to make the shift than for a larger establishment to make the shift. I don't think that the sanitization requirements would be a hardship. And if it was a hardship for some reason, maybe the city could step in with some kind of assistance that would help them make the transition to either buy a sanitizing dishwasher or something like that.
It also presents a great business opportunity here in Palm Springs for somebody to start a dishwashing service. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I also think that the 50-seat threshold's a little high, and to the extent that people have the capabilities. So I really would like it to focus less on seats, but yes, you have, and I think Commissioner Goins' point was good, which is to say, if you can put in a dishwasher, you really should put it in, because I think that we may be excluding people who do have the capability, even if they're 25 seats. So I would prefer a focus on essentially capabilities as opposed to arbitrary 50 seat or not. And I understand this is something you'll look at the survey, but that would be my preference on that specific one. I have other comments, but that's my point on that one.
Great. And I know that Commissioner Miller, you sent me a note. It said that you went to a place that was starting to do reusable cup service, like a coffee shop over in the Rabobank building.
As a matter, I mean, there are starting to be coffee shops that are using reusables. The one I was referring to is, let's see, what is it? Red Collar. It was Ristorette.
Okay.
Pardon me?
They're changing the name now. It's Red Collar now?
Yes, that's right. And you have to ask for it because you're still so used to using paper.
Right.
But when you do, it's kind of an opportunity to educate them a little bit, because it's, somebody that's so used to using paper all the time that they don't even know they have the cup sometimes.
Right.
But the business is totally online with it.
Okay, great.
I'm sure there'll be others coming up as well. And we should maybe offer some incentive by way of advertising, or this company is doing thus and so. Just a thought.
To your point, to incentivize, and I think always mandating something can cause resistance when you want to present it as a better way and let people choose that better way once they're informed. But with a reusable cup, since we're a very stylish and design-driven city, how, if we could do some program where maybe some of our designers and artists could offer up a limited edition graphic that could be available, kind of a collect them all for residents and visitors. So, there's some fun and collectibles to it. So limited editions, and it could be even some very famous artists and architects help with the museum or something like that. But I think that would be a real reason to, I got to go get my new Rauschenberg cup or whatever it might be, something in conjunction with supporting the other cultural outlets in the city. But I think that would be a wonderful idea.
Okay.
Considering we're a tourist destination, and I literally just got off a plane 40 minutes ago from San Francisco and Sacramento, it doesn't work for tourists because I just look at myself the past week. I've been running into coffee shops because I don't live there. So having a reusable cup for the tourists does pose a little bit of a problem because they're not the repeat customers. But it's great for us locals that are going to coffee or Starbucks wherever we go. Some people daily or twice a day.
So we can figure out a way to word that maybe, yeah.
The reusable is to, you use it in the cafe and you leave it there. They have really inexpensive ones that are like $2. Even Starbucks sells those, yeah, so.
Yeah, I think we could think about some creative ways. And there's also, I sent a note to iHub with the two companies that are starting a reusable cup service in a couple of cities in California. And so I think that would be an awesome connection to make if we could get one of those businesses here to offer that service. So.
Service?
Yeah, it's a service. So they'll go around and you can take the cup to basically any restaurant that participates and drop it off and pick it up someplace else. And
So they drive around and pick up?
They drive around, pick them up, wash them, give them back to the places.
Good at all? I mean,
I'm sure that they drive electric vehicles.
normally you just wash the cups in the
Right.
in the restaurant.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's helpful.
Yeah.
Also, with the, for businesses that are too small, that can't accommodate dishwashing facilities, perhaps the model that they use for linens, for hospitality and that, because those people certainly do not maintain their own laundries and staffs, and the expense is less when they're doing a high volume. So using that model might be something very productive for being able to do those reusable china and glassware, and that could be delivered and picked up every day, kind of like old empty milk bottles used to be picked up. But the model would be based on the laundry services, I think would be an ideal one.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, I'll move on to some of the other elements here. So if you can't do in-house, reusable ware in-house, then, and for takeout service, you would use rapidly biodegradable products. And so in here, I've identified that we would want things to be certified rapidly biodegradable. There's an institute that does that. They've got tons and tons of products on their website. So we would be deferring to that list of products as opposed to making our own. I've talked to a couple of cities who tried to make their own list of products at the beginning and just abandoned it because it just wasn't helpful and they couldn't keep up. So the other element to that is that non-compostable foil is acceptable. So again, almost every city that's going to this model allows for foil because you can generally fold it up and put it in your recycling. And so the other one that I added was use of biodegradable paper bags made of 100% recycled content, even if they're not certified, as a way to promote more of that secondary paper market too, because I know that that's a challenge too. So anyway, so we've identified those two. Also, any sorts of accessories should be available on request and not just given to people. So again, that's sort of part of the current straw ban at the state level, but people aren't really following it that much. So anyway, so reinforcing that and making sure that people have active ways on site and through their websites to have people identify whether or not they want those. So all of those things sort of combine for the off-site food consumption takeaway stuff. And then the only other piece of this that, again, it comes from some of the other cities, is that if you do on-site dining and you have reusable ware, so for example, a tray or a basket, that it's also okay to wrap things in paper, like a sandwich or a burrito or something like that, that you need to hold it together, basically. So that's called out in here as well. So anyway, so I've included those. And then the other thing I've called out in here are some prohibitions. So one thing that I did want to include and wanted to talk to you guys about is that we included a very broad statement in here about polystyrene foam. And so that we say that no person shall sell, offer for sale, or otherwise distribute within the city any disposable food serviceware made in whole or in part from polystyrene foam. So basically that prevents it's on the page 4 of the ordinance draft. And so right in the, kind of towards the bottom, 5XX010. So what that does is it helps to combat the issue that Commissioner McCann and I saw when we did the waste audits in the park, where the guy, even if we stop the guy at the concession stand from putting things into styrofoam containers, there are all these picnickers out there that have their plates and their cups and everything that ends up in the fences because they just sit it out there and it blows away. So anyway, so I think that's something that I wanted to call to your attention and see if you guys had any questions, concerns, issues around that. So pushback, anything.
You can go into one of the 99-cent stores and get 20 or more, styrofoam plates for 99 cents.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever the restaurants do, like you said, people are buying those, and the value is great, but, why are they being allowed, why do we allow them to be sold?
Right.
That was going to be my question too. But why don't you put your hand up first?
Oh, boy. My apologies for not having reviewed my ordinances a little bit sooner, because I was, I had in my brain single-use plastics, but actually what we missed on this is styrofoam, even in blocks, as in ice chests.
Mhm.
And I have 3 ordinances here. Can you remember?
No,
Yeah.
you just remember, yeah.
Okay. So, Ojai, Watsonville, what was the other one here? Culver City. Anyway, and they're all kind of the same. They talk not only about the fluorinated, the PFAS, which is contained in polystyrene. It's more and more information is coming out about it all the time. We even heard about it at DWA today. But for instance, here's from Ojai, polystyrene/plastic for products means any item such as coolers, ice chests, cups, bowls, plates, clamshells, shipping boxes, containers, cutlery, and other merchandise containing polystyrene/plastic foam that is not wholly encapsulated or encased by a more durable material. So basically, you go down to Rite Aid and you buy yourself a styrofoam ice chest, and then, it's, what's going to happen to it?
Trash.
It's going to go into the desert, it's going to break up into little pieces, and there you have it, And this is a big problem. It's one of the most frequent contaminations in the desert. And we have the perfect setup for it to degrade, which is heat, sunshine. And I think we have to do a ban. Now, there's ways of putting it that, because it's not just a ban on potentially single-use plastics that would go to landfill and therefore produce greenhouse emissions, but it's a ban on substances that go into our environment and can cause great damage and are irreversible and are permanent. In fact, the PFAS chemicals are called the forever chemicals. So I think we need to enlarge this. And based on, let me get the title of one of them. It wouldn't be single use anymore. It would be by adding, by adding a new chapter 14 requiring the use of environmentally acceptable packaging and products. So it's actually a styrofoam ban. Now, we know that styrofoam, block styrofoam potentially can be, well, PSDS wants to say that they can recycle it. Whether that's true or not, we still have to consider what's the right thing to do in Palm Springs, irregardless of PSDS. I'll leave it at that.
Just a point of clarification. So we're talking about even national brands, so Smart and Final wouldn't be able to sell it in Palm Springs, but yet they could go to Desert Hot Springs and buy the same thing in a neighboring community.
So here's one point about that, is that I think some of the other desert cities are interested in doing something similar. And so we're actually having a meeting with them on the 28th to talk more, or later this month, to talk more about some of these issues. And this is one of the ones I was going to bring up to see if we could get some energy around having it be desert-wide. So yeah, I think a lot of people are on the verge of doing this. So it's really just a matter of coordination.
And that was an issue, I believe, with the single-use plastic bags in grocery stores.
Yeah.
Right. But there was discussion with the chains, and eventually that ordinance passed.
The whole focus so far seems to be on food service establishments. Does the ordinance, and I'm kind of returning to Sandra's point here, does the ordinance contain anything either incentivizing or prohibiting the supermarkets from offering and selling the styrofoam plates that we were talking about that goes in the park, the single-use plastic utensils, and the plastic-coated cups? That essentially what I've just mentioned there is exactly what most people go to the store and purchase for their home parties, and the amount of waste is incredible.
So the only thing that's covered here is the polystyrene foam containers or cups, and so that's the only thing I focused a broader prohibition on. So we could broaden that to include, as Commissioner Miller mentioned, other sorts of styrofoam products, or we could include other sorts of disposables. So mimic some of the language that's above here to say that stores can only carry things that are rapidly biodegradable and that kind of thing. So we could mirror that language and carry it through to the retail establishments as well.
I'd love to get some discussion on that. What do you all think about that? Is that infringing on a business's right to offer the cheapest product to consumers, or?
I don't think it's, I don't see any constitutional issue. No, I mean, this is simply a different degree of, we ban plastic bags first here in Palm Springs, and then statewide, that was the concern, you're infringing on, et cetera, and we got over it. So I fully support broadening the ordinance to essentially saying nothing that's not degradable sold anywhere, whether it's at a food service establishment or at Smart and Final, where where I often shop for these things, and that will then drive conduct. I mean, I host a lot of events, and people they tend to use it, but sure, I'd love to be using things there, and it would make those products more readily available.
Yeah.
So I think that there's it's almost a twofer kind of thing, which is it would get them out of our landfill, but also drive us to think about those choices. So that's my thought. And just to go back to, I had a really small drafting point which I've raised, which is just to make sure that in the section on off-site food consumption, if you're under whatever threshold for reusable, then whatever it is you're doing on-site also has to be fully disposable. Just a minor drafting point.
Yep.
And that's it from me.
To your point, especially with sort of the big box buying offices for these budget stores or with the big grocery stores, once the buyers and the merchants know they can go after that and promote it and offer that to their, to their customers. So with our guidance and encouragement, it helps put them in the direction where they're not caught in that loop too with their customers saying, well, they come to us for the styrofoam cups or the plates. So then it gives them the opportunity to go into a new business, which could actually be better for them. So I think there's a lot of reason for them, and not what are we going to do without our styrofoam. There are other options, and they have the opportunity to work with their vendors and bring that into line. So I think it would be a great idea.
Again, I hate to keep doing this, but as a big box, a Walmart is going to be very difficult to say, we want you to remove this whole section of plastic, single-use materials that people rely on, especially for parties. If you're hosting a graduation party, a quinceañera, in a church or something where there is no dishwasher. So it becomes two sides of that coin. I'm not disagreeing, but I'm just seeing the potential pushback.
I would say, as far as Walmart goes, I don't think that we should ever look to them for any leadership, because they're not in my business, and don't get me on a rant here. They are the lowest bar, the lowest bar. So let's not look for any direction or even cooperation for them. They are not the end all and be all.
My question was, when you were looking at the rapidly biodegradable products and other options, were there options sufficient to cover these scenarios? One that comes to mind for me would be, well, so if you get something that's both hot and wet, like a soup or a stew, people will get a heavy-duty paper container, but then wrap it in plastic film. And so there are all these other kinds of scenarios that can happen if there are products that suit those needs. But it sounds like that's not a concern. So.
Right. So one of the things that this, two comments to that, actually three. So one is that I don't know, I said that there are lots of options. The one question that I still have is on utensils. So that's something that I want to get more information on, as far as the accessibility of utensils that are actually usable that meet these criteria. So that's one question that we want to investigate a little further. Number two is all of the products on that list, the certified list, don't have any sort of plastic coating or anything like that. So, and the other thing I would say about that is that I was just in, I don't know if this was in Arlington or somewhere else I was visiting, but they had switched over to these, can't remember what the name of the product is, but they're fantastic, and they do hot, cold, wet stuff, and there's really no, unless you leave it in there all day, I'm sure it would probably seep through, but for the most part, they held up really, really well. And I can't remember what the third one was, so.
It would be the same, some of the same materials, corn and soy based, that you also use for the dog bags, which is hot and moist, and you certainly don't want that to be breaking open.
Right.
But even with the utensils, other than those materials, there's also bamboo.
Mm-hmm.
So it has a nice feel, it's recyclable, and the bamboo has an extremely high yield. So it's a great crop to exploit.
So I remembered number three, which was this does include biodegradable plastics. As long as they meet that certification of being rapidly biodegradable, it does not exclude them. So I know that some cities have excluded all bio-based plastics. A lot of them have allowed them. And so my feeling is, as long as it meets that criteria for biodegradability, then we should probably include it, and it gives people more options, especially in the near term. We could look at, down the road if that doesn't seem to be the right thing to do, or if something changes that we learn about. But it seems like something that we should probably include at this point to give people a more variety of options. So it also addresses the concerns like the Great Shakes guy, who has a product that people want to see through, and so a lot of the fiber-based products are not see through. So it addresses that concern too. So yeah.
So this time, just starting to think out of the box here, but trying to address Carl's issue. Suppose our ordinance did the following. It allowed these establishments to sell both types of products, but if you buy the plastic non-reusable single-use product, then you pay a small tax on it, and the tax revenue then goes right back to the grocery stores and the establishments and enables them to lower the price of the good stuff to the point where it's competitive with the plastic stuff. And then the consumer is left with a choice. Should I buy good stuff or bad stuff when they're both kind of priced the same?
So just a note about that, one of the things that you do not see in here that I mentioned last time that we met was I had included a fee for disposables in the concepts that I had included before. The lawyers took that out because they felt like, well, they took out the language that said that the money would go back to the city to have these programs. So if we said that it just went to the vendor, then I think that would be acceptable because a couple of other cities have done that. So just something to keep in mind. So that approach might work. It probably won't work if we tried to get the money back ourselves and pay for our programs. So
Yeah, I love that idea. Is there any way to guarantee that the rebate is going to go back to
Right, goes right-
plastics,
yeah.
not
Yeah.
to the gardening department or
Right.
salaries or
Right.
any other?
yeah, I don't know that we can specify that. So anyway, so all good thoughts. And so this is actually, it's going to be interesting because even though I think some people felt like we were a little late to the game on this, I think we're actually in a really good place because some of these other cities are trying out some of these ideas, like especially the fee for disposables is being implemented, I think now in Berkeley and maybe Santa Cruz. And so they're doing that as sort of an experiment to see what the feedback is, so.
So to cover all the bases, we ought to have a section that says that people can bring in their items from home and can change out their takeout food at the table. It can't go back into the kitchen. It has to be done by the customer at the table. And that's another viable way to get your take-home. I always like that take-home stuff. But, it could be glass, it could be number 2 plastic, it could be whatever they bring from home. But that's not a very big section. I haven't found an ordinance yet that has it, but I know they're out there.
So I've got language in here that allows people to bring use their own reusables. So yeah, so and unless he deleted it, and I don't know if he did or not, but I did include a statement in here that said that they can bring it in based on health requirements and all that. So that should be in here too. So I'll make sure that it's in there if it's not. Yep.
Question with the packaging use of the styrofoam. Most of electronics are heavily packed
Yeah.
in layers and layers of it. So how do we encourage merchants then to maybe put pressure on their vendors to explore other packaging methods? Because styrofoam is not the only way to deliver electronics safely. So what can we do to encourage that, if not drive that a little bit more forcefully?
It's a good question. I don't know that I've seen much in the way of ordinance language around that, but I know that lots of stuff is happening at the national level on that front in terms of sustainable packaging. But I can see if there's other cities who've done something like that. So, all right. So let's keep it moving here. I think that's really the primary pieces of the ordinance, except for the waivers and the application to city activities. So it would affect all city facilities as well as contracts, leases, all that kind of stuff. So it would apply to all city activities as well.
So Patrick, what do you see as the next step now after we've had this discussion?
So what I need to do is go back and figure out how that language might be reflected in here, give you guys a revised version of the draft, and then I think what we need to do is start the analytical piece, which is, okay, you want all of these things, but I know that the first question that some of the council members are going to ask, how much is this going to affect people in their pocketbook and, all that kind of stuff. So we need to do an analysis of cost comparisons. We need to, I think, engage probably a new set of stakeholders, which is the retail folks. We also need to re-engage the restaurant people because even though we invited them to our great meeting that we had, not a lot of them showed up. And so I think as we get stuff that's more concrete, people will engage more readily. I also talked to a guy, one of the owners of Coffee, and thought maybe we could have a little technical session with some small set of vendors. Would be nice to have some business owners just come in for a brainstorming session or something like that. So I think the more that we can get on paper and the more that clear it is, clearly written it is, then people will have more to say about it as we get closer. So anyway, I think that's the next step, really. Yeah.
Just a real quick one. I think that as quickly as we can roll out residential recycling, it's the more that's going to benefit this. So the more that our population knows that this is important to us, it's important to all of Palm Springs, and we used to get that going, it's going to benefit this, and people are going to get more excited about it.
Right, and in the meantime, we're going to start really promoting reusable ware. That we're going to be doing these as giveaways, so the reusable straws, reusable utensils, and then really promoting reusable cups and containers and things like that. So really getting that message out that that is really the way that we want people to go. So, okay, yep.
I thought we talked about this before, I can't remember, did we talk to the school district as well? And
No, we haven't talked.
I don't know how they
Yeah.
serve their lunches or
Yeah.
anything.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I did. So we went with the students who presented to your commission and the city council, and we went with them to the school district and offered and asked the school district board to join us in partnership and roll out what we roll out. So I think that the board was open to that, and you're right, they serve 1 million meals
Yeah.
or something like that, right? A
Right.
huge number. And so they already have some policies where they're trying to, not using straws and things like that, but I'm sure that they could improve and we could work with them.
And one last one, the hospital.
Yeah,
there's
that was the
all
other
those
one I was thinking of. We might
website.
need to have some exemptions in there for hospitals, but I'm not sure. So we get to talk to them a little bit more about that, because I know when you go to visit folks in a hospital, they usually got a styrofoam cup there, partly because they need to keep it cold for a long time. So anyway, so we can chat with them and find out what their policy might be. So, yeah.
We also have a regular business retention subcommittee meeting, and so the next one I think will not be until January, but we have the chamber, we have restaurants, we have many of the business stakeholders there. So if you wanted a meeting dedicated to this issue or sustainability issues, we could do that, and then host, and they come to those meetings. And we have a decent amount of people there.
Great. All right.
Christie, do you have any thoughts about the timeframe in which the council will be looking at this issue?
It's up to you, I think, and how quickly you bring it to us. So we're really open, and I've really enjoyed this. Thank you for having me. I know I'm not here enough, but it's fun to watch you kind of create the cake. And often it comes to me, you're baking the cake, and often it comes to me and it's baked, and you've done all this really hard work, and it's just really great to hear all of the thinking and the work that you do behind the ordinances. So I think it's open. We can talk about what timing you'd like to see and how much research you need to do for that. Yeah, I'm fully supportive. I've been working with you on this for almost a year now, probably. So I'm fully supportive. That's why I wanted to be here and support this work. And I think what you have is incredible, and I'm happy to support it and try to push it and move quickly if you'd like, unless you need more time to do more outreach and research.
Yeah, I think that's really the critical component that I see, is that I think we do need to do a little more outreach on this, especially if we expand it in the way that we were just talking about, and figure out what that looks like. So I just wanted to make sure that all those bases are covered, and even though we have a meeting, nobody comes, that's it's not really engagement. So,
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
So then we'll move on to the next item under new business.
Yes.
Which is the Climate Action Plan.
Right.
And potential additional efforts to address climate change. And like with the single-use plastics, there is a memo from Patrick about this, with also some input requested from the commission.
Right. So this came about partly as a result of the request that you made to have a conversation about this at council. And, we've certainly gotten lots of feedback about the climate crisis and other things. And so anyway, I wanted to have more of a conversation around at the commission level about how we move forward with this, because there's lots of things that we could do. There's lots of things that we are doing. And so I wanted to make sure that we were clear about what we wanted our next step to be. So one of the things I wanted to lay out here a little bit is just remind people about what the Climate Action Plan was, because it's a little elusive. I don't know that it's actually on our website. So I need to make sure that we add that. Anyway, but it lays out lots and lots of things, but I went through it and I don't know what half of those things are, and probably none of them have happened. So anyway, so focusing on the climate action plan is one thing, but I think actually one of the things that I had said coming in here is that I want to be strategic about the things that we do and why we do them. And so I really see the need for doing our greenhouse gas inventory, which I'd planned to do internally this year, but have not had the chance to do that. And so anyway, so I think that's one of our first steps, but also looking at a lot of the stuff that's happening in terms of getting ready for the new energy code, doing the solar ordinance, and all of the other things that may come along with that, as well as DCE. And so anyway, so lots of things happening. So I want to be thoughtful about doing that. And so that's sort of, I see one set of things there is really being strategic about how we go forward with the things that we want to do. But also, I think there's this other concept of a climate emergency resolution that I think is a little bit different. And so I wanted to have that discussion and figure out kind of what you guys were thinking, what you want to do, how we want to move this concept forward. So David, did you want to chime in?
Forgive me, because this is sort of what I've been doing for basically a long time. So first, just hitting the climate resolution, I've looked at what Austin did and also what Berkeley has done. They passed one last year. It's okay. We could, if we want to do it, that's fine. The Austin one is honestly quite vague because it doesn't have any concrete actions. We already have a commitment in both the climate action plan and the sustainability plan, which is only 3.5, not even 3.5 years old, to reduce GHG emissions by 80% by 2050, which is a state standard. So if we're going to do a climate resolution, climate emergency, a couple of things is it should have a renewed commitment to actually do something. And second, there was a very good feature in the Berkeley resolution, which I've sent to Patrick, and that is working closely with disadvantaged communities and really all communities, because there's a lot of environmental justice, and that's the thing that Commissioner Baker mentioned, and it does apply to many things. So we want to do a resolution, fine, but it should be more concrete than that, and Berkeley, I think, is a good example. But I want to focus on sort of what we're doing, what we can be doing, because resolutions are nice, but I certainly have been focusing my efforts on what we can be doing. So a couple of things just to let folks know where we are, and more will come through as our Green Building Solar Committee meets. So just on GHG, that's a good idea to do an inventory, but we should probably wait until next year because we'll have the DCE roll through. So that my suggestion is just to hold off on that.
So I'm sorry, just to address that point.
Yeah.
I was thinking that we could do one for 2000 and either 18 or 19, whenever we got ourselves together, as a practice run for the 2021, that is actually the one that would be measured for the whatever.
Yeah, that'd be great. So what are the things that we're doing? As Patrick mentioned, the energy code goes into effect. Sorry about that. Thank you. Yeah, the energy code will go into effect. Council will consider that on November 6th. So that's where the solar requirement, solar on all new residential construction goes into effect. But I go to all the council meetings and you folks are saying, well, what can we go beyond that? So one area that's mentioned briefly in our report, I am working on a proposal based on an ordinance that San Francisco recently adopted, and that will require commercial buildings which are not subject to the energy code, because that just covers residential solar. But that would require them to satisfy all their on-site electricity demands from 100% greenhouse gas free or renewable sources, which they can do very easily just by staying on DCE. So if you recall, council has essentially said everyone starts out at DCE, they can opt out, and we could pass an ordinance that essentially limits opt-outs. So that's a very easy thing to do. It's sort of, you're stuck there. you're just remaining with DCE, or you could do on-site generation, so that's a possibility. So I'll be preparing a note with more details on this proposal. The challenge is, of course, DCE has not set its pricing, so it would be a little bit vague, and then it would have to get refined once DCE set its pricing. Couple of other things we have, and as is mentioned in a previous report, we've started discussions with the cannabis industry on what they can do. Very conveniently, I was thrilled to see a very long article in Sunday's Debtor Sun about sustainability in the cannabis industry. It's a lot of details that I had not seen elsewhere. One of the growers in DHS has already put on a substantial solar array, so Patrick is in touch with the Jocelyn Kane of the cannabis industry here in the valley, and hopefully we can do a field trip to see what they can doing. But since the lights are literally on all the time, that's an area, and everything is just subject to council approval, that's an area that maybe we can require them to put on some solar facilities. One or two more things. Back in 2016, for those of you who were there, when we passed the solar ordinance, it did include requirements for large retrofits, so it covered both new construction and retrofits. That's an area that we can take a look at. A number of the cities are now requiring that, so we can go back and do that, and we have all of the cost-effective studies to take another crack at that. And the other area that cities are doing as part of their what we call REACH code beyond the state code is electrification, i.e. reducing the use of gas and requiring electric. What we're seeing is people mostly care about electric for cooking, so there's a lot for saying Santa Monica said you have to use electric heaters for your pools, which apparently is market in Florida, so I think it's just California where we use gas, and also things like space and water heating, where you care about that the water is hot, but you really don't care how it gets hot. So that's an area that we really can look at, because all of these GHG reductions, we really have to look at it in terms of the buildings. We don't have any authority on cars and trucks. That's not within the city. So our margin, we want to get to the 80%, we really do have to focus on renewable energy and building energy efficiency. So that's really the things that we're looking at. We are also looking at, with Commissioner Flanagan, on the EV requirements. There are some new requirements that go into effect statewide on the Green Building Code. And while a number of cities are adding things and requiring developers, we thought, let's see what the city gets done, get its sort of plans, because I think you want to put in several dozen new chargers, and if if demand is excessive, then we can look at sort of putting things on the developers. But the city is actually planning to put on a whole bunch of new chargers. So we're doing a lot. I welcome all of your input on all of these things. The advantage is right at this time, a number of cities are passing ordinances that they have to go through the Energy Commission. So just as Commissioner Miller's been looking at various plastic and other reduction ordinances, I've been looking at energy ordinances statewide for the last few months, and there's a lot out there.
If I may, regarding our thriving and growing cannabis industry here in Palm Springs, it's my understanding that in the next month or so that the state of California will be releasing their new packaging requirements for the cannabis shops. That concerns me because I've already seen quite a lot of single-use plastics, which are, I think, inconsistent with the 420 movement, and a lot of the companies are very green and in their packaging, but a lot of the more commercial, and particularly the edibles, I see the trash downtown every day. So what input can we have once the state, perhaps even before the state had released it, but I think right now we have to wait, and the shops are waiting because they don't know what's going to be required of them, and that's going to be some changes for their packaging. But wrapping everything in Mylar and plastic probably is not the solution for any of our foods or any products, particularly natural products. So what can we do about that? Because it will become a problem.
I concur with Commissioner Friedman. I read the Austin article, and I thought it was pretty vague, and I really don't think that it's an emergency. And I also looked at the Climate Action Plan, which is 6 years old, and the Sustainability Plan, which is 3 years old, and a lot of the things that are discussed in both of those documents we have done already, or we are working on, and I think that's great progress. One thing that hasn't been mentioned, but I think also contributes to this effort, is the ban on gas-powered leaf blowers. The motive for that mostly was noise, but we stopped the emissions from all those gas engines, those two-cycle gas engines in the leaf blowers. Most of them. More on that later.
Yes.
But the bottom line is, I think we've accomplished a lot consistent with the plans that we have.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to actually do the greenhouse gas inventory to see how we're progressing, because we had already met our target years ago, but we've had such growth since then. I'm just not sure whether or not what we've been doing to bring things down is offsetting that. So yeah.
Yeah, and go ahead.
I really appreciate what David is saying, and I think that this is certainly our renewable energy angle is got to be very prominent in our plan. But the other thing that we have to realize is that our garbage leaves Palm Springs. So we have tremendous amount of GHGs being produced in landfill. And other places, even in the Coachella Valley, the only place that we have GHGs produced here is in our sewage treatment plant, which actually attempts to burn methane, and it does it unsuccessfully, of course. So, I don't know how we're going to do this count when we send all our garbage to Lamb Canyon. So I think we have to be responsible. We have to take into account, they know how much garbage we're giving them.
So they actually do include that in the in the inventory.
Oh, they do?
Yes.
You don't?
Yep,
Okay.
it's accounted for.
Well, then I'd take it one step further. Let's see if we can collaborate to change how they do not handle greenhouse gas emissions. In other words, they don't have any way of incinerating them at a temperature that will destroy methane. And plus, they produce the carbon dioxide. That is where tons and tons of our garbage goes in Lamb Canyon. Plus, we have another 4 landfills in the Coachella Valley, which also are producing methane. But even if we couldn't capture that, because there's some technicalities in some of these places where they can't, it's not going to be a lot, there's any number of reasons. But what we can do is we can put solar on top of the landfills that are now defunct, they're not being used. They are doing this all over the country, planting solar on top of landfills and then, having it hooked right up to the grid. And if they can capture methane, then they will do so. But at least we can do that. And that is taking responsibility for our garbage, in my opinion, rather than just counting what we've deposited someplace else.
Thank you. So if I could talk a little bit about this request, because I didn't do it at the beginning. So we've gotten a number of requests. A number of cities have passed resolutions for a climate crisis. Obviously, we're all too busy to pass resolutions for no purpose that don't have accountability mechanisms. But I've also gotten a lot of constituent requests about what are the accountability mechanisms for our climate action plan. Did we do a plan and we put it on a shelf in terms of the city council or in terms of the residents? And so I thought that this would be a good opportunity, and we always do things better than any other city, right? But a good opportunity to have you and come to you and say, what do you think would be good accountability measures or good accountability for the city council to push your work forward? Since you're doing such incredible work and everything you listed, I support, and just to push us to think about, if we're not here tomorrow or next year, how are we going to make sure that we're moving as quickly as possible to our shared results. So that was really just an opportunity I saw, and really making sure, because the city council, you all work with the climate action plan, but it's not coming to the city council for reporting necessarily. I know you work on it, but for our residents as well, to engage them, because I think a lot of this single use, this is all movement building stuff to get resident engagement, to get buy-in, to make sure that we need to move their hearts and minds about the climate crisis, about sustainability. And so thinking about how we could use a resolution to do that, to support the work that you're doing, or to also get support from the city council or from the city to actually effectuate a lot of your goals, if that makes sense. So it doesn't have to be like Austin. I mean, there have been dozens and dozens of cities who have done these. San Jose, Berkeley have looked at them, but thinking about what could that look like for us. And I just thought that would be a good conversation to have here about how can I and how can city council further support our sustainability goals, our climate action plan, your objectives, and how can we legislate that in some way.
I just wanted to ask for a little clarification. So in this resolution, are you really looking for sort of a very metric-based resolution? You know, we will do X by Y measured in percentages, or, you know, absolute numbers? Or is this more of a get people engaged in sustainability and improve our city resolution, or is it both?
I think that's my question to you, is what should that look like? We have a lot of the metrics in our climate action plan. So how far are we along on some of those? What is the work we need to do to assess that? It's really for you all are the experts. You got to do this, all the time. And so I have to work on lots of different issues. So please tell me, what should that look like? Do you think that we should do this? Would that be helpful for your work? How can we support moving that forward?
The reason why I asked that question, and I think this is something that happens in a lot of places where people talk about sustainability, is that we look to new technologies completely as the solution to our problems, when sometimes the oldest technologies can have the greatest good. I mean, legs don't really release greenhouse gas emissions, so what can we do there? I feel like we don't have to necessarily be concerned with things that we have direct control of. If we're having direct impact, but important impact, that's something we should be doing too. So ways to improve pedestrian access, to make the neighborhoods more friendly to pedestrians, dealing with issues of shade in the summertime, are all things that we can do that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions by potentially cooling our space and encouraging people to walk more. So if there are things that we can do that are less technocentric, I think for some segments of the population, that's going to be more motivating than a simple, let's reduce by 20% X, Y, or Z metric.
So I'm going to sort of push on the other side. Two points I want to make, and the first one is to clarify and to see if we're all on the same page about the climate action plan. And my understanding of it was that the sustainability plan that was passed in 2016 and accepted by council had, as part of the climate action plan, the city of Palm Springs had already signed up to have a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by next year back to 1992 levels. And so that was already supposed to be in play. I haven't seen any work on it. And I just want, so is that true that really we have no idea whether we're going to be in compliance with what the city set up to do 3 years ago?
So that is correct.
Okay.
But the thing that I would say about that is that when the sustainability plan was actually written, we were already meeting that number. And so what hasn't happened is a systematic annual or biannual reassessment to say, are we still there? Are we moving in the right direction? So what's lacking is the more current information about where we are with relation to any of those goals. And so the sustainability plan was very high level and said, okay, we shall do we shall meet this target. The climate action plan listed a bunch of things in it that required funding that I don't know got funded and had some reductions associated with them. But again, I don't know that much of that was tracked or actually accounted for. So again, I think some stuff was done very early on. Like when Michelle started, there was a huge movement to do a lot of things, and a lot of stuff got done. And so there was this huge push at the beginning, and then you saw this sort of leveling out. And I don't know if it was because people felt like we met our target or because, other things happened or budgets changed or whatever. So the economic downturn, all that kind of stuff kind of came into play in or 2013 or so. So anyway, so I think there were a lot of things that went into kind of this early push and then sort of a stasis. And now we're in the we don't know category is the way I describe it.
So that sounds to me, Christy, like two things with teeth could get passed by council. One is that the Office of Sustainability needs more resources. It needs more people. And it needs them to do things like get out there and start measuring. And we can all work on how to do that. There's landfill issues. I'm sure there could be assessments of the number of gas guzzling cars in town. And, we could do all this. It's possible to do it. And then the second thing that you could do as part of an emergency resolution is revisit. So if we're supposed to be at 1992 levels next year, well, let's get more aggressive on it and start to put more teeth into it. Let's get past 1992 levels. I think the Climate Action Plan actually has by 2030 that we're supposed to be carbon neutral. Now, I'm not exactly sure what carbon neutral means, but
it didn't explain
let's define it.
But yeah.
Time to define it.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that's exactly right. So thank you for that feedback. That's exactly what I'd like to hear, and we can continue this conversation. So I know don't mean to be a pop quiz right now. So if you can think about, and that's my job as the liaison, to think about what resources, what were the unfunded mandates in the Climate Action Plan that we have not yet funded, that we need to fight for funding for, what is the staff support and all of the support you need from the budget or whatever that looks like. And then, what are the accountability mechanisms that we can put in place or help with to actually put new goals into place or to track the where we are now or to actually set in process? Because if we don't have that, we'll be here in 2030 not knowing where we are.
I'll just reinforce very quickly this resource issue for the Office of Sustainability. Every time that we pass an ordinance, there's enforcement issues, there's reporting issues, and I know that our poor manager of the Office of Sustainability right now, for example, is having to spend an enormous amount of time with leaf blower complaints. So the general point is, we need more resources because we need to track these things once we pass them.
So I think it would be interesting to, and I don't know what form this takes, if it's a resolution or not, but I think it would be an interesting thing to create a memo or create a document that just says, we know this is a problem. Like, we know that greenhouse gas emissions are a problem. We know climate change is happening. We know that it's affecting us locally as well as globally. And then to say, we are already targeting these things and this is what we're looking at, so that it's clearer to the public and to the council to say, here's all the things that are in the works. And then to say, here are the things that would help move us forward. And so have a few things in there, like some additional resources for even hiring consultants at this point to help us with an inventory, to understand where we are better and that kind of thing. And so to just have a few statements about, here are some critical needs that we think we would have to actually get us further and to take us to that next level. Because I'm sure that as we look into some of these energy code things, that we're going to think about, oh my gosh, we need some help to figure out X, or to incentives for people to do Y or something like that. So I think we could come up with a really good list, and I don't think that would be a huge amount of effort, but anyway.
I've been carrying this kind of on my own. At some point, particularly for cost effectiveness studies, that is a requirement, so any mandate. There are a lot of state studies, but we would probably want to bring that down and localize it. And to the extent that we do require anything along the lines of electrification or additional solar beyond the state requirement, that will, under the state rules, require a cost effectiveness study and has to be approved by the ordinance has to go through Energy Commission approval, because because the existing solar policy is a resolution and not an ordinance, it was a bit of a, I won't say a fudge, but we just sort of managed to do it as a bridge to 2020. But if we go down the mandatory route, it will require additional resources. I will continue all of the work, that's fine, but at some point, we're going to need to get a professional to do these things, to help out, and sort of tie the ribbon around it, both, I think, for the staff report, sort of the quantification, because that's what I can't do, is to say it's going to cost you so much, and then try to quantify both the initial costs and the cost savings, because I think that's what council, I expect that will be a council question for council, and I'm not able to do it beyond what the state has already done.
And I think there was also the question that came back from council about when we were talking about the solar zoning ordinance was what kind of incentives or what kind of help are we giving to low income and that kind of thing. So if there are things that we could think about, we can't do it through the energy code is part of the problem. We can't make those any more lax, but we can incentivize things or help people out or somehow figure out some way to help people get there. So that could be part of this statement too, is to figure out what those incentives are and incentivize. So.
And I think your suggestion about a document, and it sounds like it would take the form of a resolution with the whereas, be it resolved. I think that would be.
If we can avoid the whereases, it would be nice. But
right. But it has
maybe
that
a statement.
information.
Maybe a statement.
It has that same information with the
yeah.
background and then moving forward. But I think that's a really good suggestion that we should move forward
make it
with.
meaningful and not we don't have to model other cities, but we can just say, hey, here's what we're doing and here's what we need to do next. And
communications to the council and to the residents.
Yeah,
is important.
exactly.
I would make a plug for figuring out exactly what we want to do first among ourselves, because I don't think we're all on the same page. I think a way to do that would be in the form of a retreat. I think these can be extremely helpful just for the purpose of writing a resolution and becoming clear among ourselves, because I'm noticing, we have 4 committees that are doing pedestrian stuff. And, it seems like there's not quite as much focus as I would like to see on actual greenhouse gas emissions. And that requires some money, maybe a professional that would lead it. I certainly can't lead it. So that would be something that, if other people were interested, I'm sure that a retreat format might help us out.
I'm not here to create any more work for anyone because I know you have important work that you're working on, but just thinking about, I think how we can better work together and liaise and bring this important work and information and the next steps and accountability for the climate action plan goals to council and to residents. And so I'm here to help in any way. So I'm happy to help write that document with you. We can continue this conversation and have it on a future agenda. However I can help and be supportive, I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Great.
Can I just get general feedback that the sort of areas that I'm looking at are generally sort of areas that, I should continue research on? Electrification, cannabis, sort of the thou shalt, use 100% renewable, that I should continue along those lines, because I can, prepare a note. It'll probably go to our Solar Green building for early November, and then we can bring it back to the commission for the November meeting. So is that the general approach that folks would like to see, just so I have some direction to start writing in the next week or so?
Is there a consensus?
Yes.
I think the only other thing I would add to that is we had talked about it a little bit, which is in a historical preservation context, but I think there is a lot of wins we could have in terms of boosting energy efficiency in homes. And so we look a lot at times at just new construction, new building, and so really looking at how we can incentivize energy efficiency efforts at home. So
Next topic.
Yes.
Next topic,
Yes.
but yes,
Yeah.
that'll be mentioned in the report. But thank you, Patrick, for that sort of
little
plug for my next comment.
Okay. All right. Well, great. So we'll do a little brainstorming about timing and how to have this conversation and move it forward, because I think that solves a little bit of my concern about just the interaction with council is that I think there's a lot happening and there's not that communication both to the council and to the public, I think, about what all that is, so.
Right, and if that's a different format, like it's a joint study session or it's a, larger meeting with, the council members and the commission, however that looks like to you, whatever would be useful for your work, we want to make happen.
Right.
So please let us know.
We will. I think the last meeting that we had outside of these with the liaison to the commission was over a year ago. It should be more frequent than that.
And I think some of the problem is that your commission doesn't have a council subcommittee to go to, which is frequently the lever to get things to council. And so we have liaisons for all the commissions. I think I have 16. I think I have 20 plus subcommittees. You can pull the list. And so the liaison structure isn't a great one because it's kind of based on, do you need me to come to a meeting and I'll be here, but it's really difficult based on having 40. But the climate crisis and sustainability is our major issue for our city. So if we can think about, is it that we want to have a subcommittee of the council on sustainability? I think it's a good idea to then have a way to get things from the commission automatically to council, because you'll have 2 council members and you'll have a subcommittee. It's formal, because when I was on the Human Rights Commission, our complaint was that we would do all this work, and then it sits there. And so, ways to expedite, and I know you're good at this and that's your role too, but thinking about how we can make formal channels. So if there's formal check-ins or formal meetings, if you want me to attend every meeting, I'm happy to try to make that happen. So just let me know what you need from me, and I will happily do it and bring whoever I need to bring along.
And that's actually working well with a couple of things that 1PS is working on, the cannabis facilities and the noise. In both cases, there are subcommittees, and the 1PS Code Enforcement Public Works Committee members have been working directly with the subcommittees. It's a good communications channel.
Yeah, I'm surprised we don't have a standing subcommittee for sustainability, because it's such an important issue, and that's the role that this commission has played. But we can think about, what should that look like? What would be most useful for you? And you just tell me, and I will do it, and we'll make it happen. Cool. I'll stop taking all of your time. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That was a great
Thank you for
discussion.
coming.
Thanks. Yes, I think so. That's right.
So should we do a time check before proceeding?
We should do a time check. It is 6:40, and I know a couple of us want to skedaddle around 7 o'clock. And so I think as we go forward, the old business should be very fast.
Yes.
And so then it's really just the commission reports. So just hit the highlights, and I think we should be okay.
Okay. So we'll just try to move through them as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first item under old business is the student rep, and Patrick has looked into that since our last meeting.
Yeah, so there are only 2 high school level organizations here in the city, so Palm Springs High School and Desert Learning Academy. Desert Learning Academy does not have a religious affiliation. So I also contacted the other commissions, and only one of them, none of them have a student rep on them now. One of them seemed interested, which was the Parks and Rec. And so what I was going to do is I'm going to draft a letter. I will run it through Cynthia, who is the Parks and Rec director, and we'll get that out and hopefully have somebody, at least responses by early November is my hope. So we'll get it out to those 2 organizations, see what kind of response we get, and move that forward. So I was going to focus their attention on helping us, especially with Earth Day and some other communications efforts with regard to other stuff that the commission is doing, and then also raising issues to the commission. So,
great, thank you. Mm-hmm. Then the next item is fountain grass eradication. We talked about that last time, and Patrick was going to talk to Stacy to see if there was a pilot project that we could do with the the city's landscaping company?
It's on my list of many things to talk to maintenance about. So that has not happened yet.
Okay, so we'll
Yeah.
keep that on the agenda for the next
Yes.
meeting. The community garden naming plan, we talked about that the last time. The target is to have that on, to have a ceremony on Monday, the 9th of December, sometime in the morning. And we also talked about having the tree planting ceremony for our Arbor Day trees at the same time. And I've received some information from Jennifer about the types of trees that are being considered. Would you like to explain?
Yeah, when we had met for Arbor Day, we had a local gardener as well as Rosa from Parks and Rec. And so she really wanted to have a fig tree. There's a few different figs that we can plant. There's some desert kind of tolerant peach trees, and we thought about a Satsuma tangerine. So there's room for 4 to 5 trees. And, you know, so I think we can go ahead with that and have more edible garden.
And we did talk about fruit trees in the past, and there seemed to be a preference for fruit trees. So now that we have this recommendation, I think really if we can get a consensus from the commission, then we can go ahead with the planning. So is there any discussion, any more discussion on that?
I heard, okay, the fig trees I definitely heard. And then the peach, which was the desert tolerant peach?
Heat tolerant peach.
Wow. And that was that it then?
Satsuma tangerine.
Oh.
Because they're small, and citrus grows really well here, but they're small, nice little package, and we can have more kids eating more fruit, the smaller the fruit.
Would that be subject to blight possibly with the citrus problems?
There's already citrus in that garden, so possibly, but
Yeah. I don't know
hopefully
that I've
not.
seen a lot.
Yeah.
Citrus is nice for our image, so we always think goes with citrus. So I love it.
Personally, before I'd plant a tree of that magnitude, I would want to check it out with master gardeners. Because it's, you know, trees are not cheap, for one thing. The fig, I'm pretty sure is a go, but the other two, I just don't know. I haven't seen them here in the Coachella Valley even.
Sherry Hennessy, who did the tree planting with the kids, I would call her a master gardener even though she's not part of the organization because she's been gardening here for the last
take
30
it.
years. But I would be happy to contact master gardeners and just clear it with them too.
If you're confident.
As far as master gardeners, my older sister who lives in Cherry Valley, she has a landscaping business. She's a master gardener and an arborist. And she has worked and done a lot of referrals for people here in the desert with some of her clients. She knows I'm on this committee, and I'm sure that she would be happy to come and attend a meeting and give advice and any feedback that you might need. So.
It could even be a conference call, so she doesn't have to drive unless she wants to come visit you. So well, let's do that.
Let's stay green, great.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll discuss this again next month and hopefully have a final plan. Okay, great. Thank you. And leaf blower ban enforcement that Patrick has been spending a lot of time on.
Yes, so we've evolved a little bit in our enforcement efforts. So I have started to send letters to every homeowner who is in violation or whose gardener is in violation. And so letting them know that they are part of the solution too. So hopefully they will help us get the word out. However, what we're running into is a lot of the places that are being serviced by folks that are not in compliance are not here. So they are vacationers or they're vacation rentals or whatever they are. And so I've now gone to the next level, which is to find the database that has their mailing address. So now I send it to their mailing address, which is usually somewhere else. So I've just started to do that, so hopefully that will get some sort of a response. I've also added a clause that says that we are talking to the 1PS Code Enforcement Subcommittee as well as other commissions and groups like this one to talk about other methods of enforcement. So the two things that we are considering, and I'd like to get your quick feedback on this. One is we are thinking about doing what Los Angeles is doing, which is actually to have the homeowner be accountable as well as the gardener. So they have done this in their language. We have legal looking into it here, and so I've had a little back and forth with our lawyers about this. So that's one approach, and then the other is to increase the fine amounts to about $500 for the first offense, especially, and maybe giving some leeway to repeat calls. So if we've gotten repeat calls about a person or a company, that they have discretion to increase the fine amount. So anyway, the other thing to note is that the state is actually increasing their incentive program probably later this year. So there will really be no excuse for anybody to not have an electric leaf blower and batteries. So anyway, so I wanted to just see if you guys had any objections to any of that you heard. And then we're going to bring it, I think, to 1PS code enforcement for discussion too.
Yes.
So.
I just can't get over that you're doing this. I mean, why? Talk to Christie. I mean,
Yeah.
that should be off your plate.
Yeah, so
Just my opinion.
we've gotten into this challenging situation with code enforcement. So code enforcement goes out, but there's never anybody there to catch, or they've stopped using it at that point. So we're talking about other things that we can do to basically make this all happen. So so it's still on my plate is the short answer to that question. So all right, okay. So that's it on leaf blowers.
So that's the end of old business. Then
Yes.
we'll move on to subcommittee and commissioner reports.
Yep.
And the first one is standing subcommittee on solar and green building.
Okay, I will start using my New York Minute voice.
Yes.
Energy Code training session, the morning of Wednesday, November 6th. UCR Palm Desert, would love to see you there. We're working with outreach with CVAG, DVBA, 48 people registered so far, so please join us. Solar zoning ordinance, Patrick mentioned, going to Planning Commission on the 23rd, and I hope then it goes to council on the 6th. At the same time, the Energy Code and the other building codes go through. This morning, I participated in a webinar from SolSmart, folks who gave us the gold plaque, and they talked about making your solar ground-mounted projects pollinator friendly. That was a really good idea. Two nice good points, brownie points in one there. So I've sent some language to Patrick and the planning folks, and hopefully, if it's not too late, we'll slip it into the ordinance when it goes before Planning Commission next week. I had some good discussions with the chair of the Historic Site Preservation Board, and we hope to do a segment on sustainability for historic resources at the time of the next HSBB symposium in probably April, and Patrick will follow up with planning on that. And then finally, and this is your homework for tonight, in our report, we talked about and Patrick just mentioned this, a home energy label pilot program with a budget of $10,000, which is already included in our budget, so that folks would be encouraged to go out and get a home energy audit that would say, these are the things that you can do to make your house more energy efficient. You can do it at the time you're selling the house, but it doesn't necessarily have to be linked to that. There are folks who are home inspectors, and they'll do it for not that much money. You can do a complicated one or a lighter one, and the net cost potentially could be less than $100 or even free if you do it at the time of a home inspection. So I'd like to make a motion for that to be approved, a $10,000 pilot program for the current fiscal year, as outlined in our report, up to $100 rebate, and I'll work with Patrick on the details, and that we'll have more details on that. So,
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I think the only thing I had added was this would be another program that would need to be administered. There's time for making sure that, there's no fraud and that everything's enforced. And I've ran a lot of efficiency programs, and it is a time, if it's something that you could add on to your list of stuff, Patrick, it really hinges on that for me.
We just had Commissioner Holstead share, and she said, just talk to me. Is that not an option, or?
She said what?
She said, talk to me about, I don't expect her to do it, but there's got to be some other staff, if we have to hire somebody, to do some of this stuff.
Well, it's something that we definitely have to address. I think what's before us now is do we want to go ahead with this pilot program? Is that something that would work against it?
I think it can be done. I mean, we'll try to do it reasonably simply, and it's sort of like all the other rebates. I think the best analogy is the leaf blower, where there is a form and you put in your receipt. And so I think we can make it as simple as possible.
Yeah, and
if we get 100 people between now and next June, we'll be ecstatic.
We'll be thrilled. And I think the only other thing I'd say about that is it's sort of a pre-approved list of people that would do it. So that's not, that monitoring is not quite as hard. So it's really, you know, here's the list of people you could choose. Here's your receipt. Thank you very much. Fill out your form. So.
The task is much more opaque. Well, I mean, this one, you show up with a piece of equipment and you show a receipt and you're done, whereas you're verifying whether that audit was done, what was done in the audit, where did they do the audit, who took, you know, there's a bunch of things that go with administering an audit type program that are much more labor intensive than what we've done with just a simple rebates.
And who are these pre-approved people on the list?
There's one guy who is a home inspector. He already has one certification, and he's working to get a Department of Energy certification. He should have that in the next couple of weeks, so that literally is only one person that I've identified in the Valley who has 2 potential audit programs. One gives you a score, one doesn't, and the other folks are Hearst raters. So if you're doing any sort of massive home improvement, the state already requires you to go get a Hearst rater, and that's the $400 to $500 one. I don't think very many people will do that. So I think it is, at least because you have to use somebody who's certified, and that would be in the program, and we know who those people are for the moment. There's only one person for 2 programs, and the Hearst raters are, you know, there's a list of those. So you have to, that would be part of the, you know, the form is to indicate who the person was, and that's the person who provides the report, so.
So are we actually talking about developing a home rating label? Is that a piece of this? No, we're just
That is
talking
that is the program. That is the program that these people run.
But they're administering a third-party rating, though. We're not going to develop.
We're not developing our own. It's theirs, yeah.
So
It's a
basically, we
different
can
system.
rely on they would have procedures and protocols to verify everything that would need to be verified. So
Right.
they'd get a report. It would have either their score or some pictures that would say something like, your house is leaky around here, and that would be the extent of it. Okay.
To the DOE and the Hearst provide a score, and I think that's part of our report. And the home inspector does a different one that's just certified by the home inspector, and that's the one who says, here's where you need more insulation. Once again, they provide the report, and that's part of that's your deliverable for getting your check.
So if we did a pilot program, what would we learn? And then what would happen after that? What would the pilot program help us to do in the future?
Well, first of all, it helps the homeowners, because to give you an example, I'm a very good, the first thing I did when I moved here full-time is get somebody in to go through my house and say, beautiful house you have here, Mr. Friedman, it has no insulation. So that, so I went and got the whole thing insulated, I get a cool roof. That's the kind of thing that then we could quantify. There would not be a requirement that somebody actually went and did it, but we could ask people. That wouldn't be a condition of getting your check, but we could go and ask people to say, if you go and do this thing, please let us know. And that's the thing that we could work to try and quantify that as in the GHG reduction. So that's the.
Yeah, we could do a little follow-up survey to anybody who got a check to say, hey, did you do it? What was your lower energy bill or whatever, yeah.
So that information would be.
And the other piece that we had talked about before too was that it might inform the DCE, that it could be a program that they would adopt as part of the broader DCE implementation to say, oh, yes, and we found that this is an effective way to promote more energy efficiency in homes, so here's a program that we're going to offer.
That would be, if it's successful, then potentially we could roll it out with DCE, and you're looking at the folks who are in the position to at least have that dialogue.
Right.
Is there any more discussion?
I just one point about the cost. So the average working family, I can see saying, I don't have the money to do this. Those people that live where Commissioner Feldman lives, it's like, oh, sure, I can get a new roof put on. Not everyone can just put on a new roof on. They're, working just to pay their bills as it is. So it seems disproportionate in terms of equity for who can do it and who can't do it. That's my point.
This is where I think the dialogue is with DCE to provide a subsidy to assist people. I don't think that's going to be, unless there's manna from heaven in the general fund, I don't see that the city would be able to do that. So that point is taken, and it would have to be a discussion with DCE. And in fact, that is among the areas that are in the potential uses of the reserves for DCE. But those reserves aren't going to be available until 2021 or beyond, just because the start date isn't 2020 until late 2020. So that is, I think, your point is well taken, but we're going to have to rely on DCE to sort of make that there. And I think, so save that point.
I think you're conflating an audit program with a labeling program. They're two totally different things. So an audit program is where you go to show somebody what they can do to improve their house and they make changes. This is not that. This is a labeling program, and so what this is trying to do is to influence people to make purchase decisions based on what they know about a house that they wouldn't have known ahead of time. So a number of jurisdictions have tried this, and it's, the jury is out whether this saves energy or not. I mean, but it's not an audit program. Does that make sense?
Yeah, although I think it does both. So people can do it in connection for the home sale, but if you can do it without that, so we're not going to do that. So so I think that it is for folks who want to see what they can save. So what you do get information on all three of these about what if you do X, Y, and Z, this is your current bill if you do these things, and it's actually individualized. So if you do X, this is how much you save, et cetera. So there is some effort to educate people. But once again, the point that Commissioner Baker has raised is entirely valid. It's just that that's not within the city's means to sort of make that happen, unfortunately.
Is there any more discussion? So we've had a motion and a second. Okay. Ready to vote? All in favor of the $10,000 pilot program, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, and we'll try to get some parameters back to the commission, if not in November, then December, so you see what this would look like before we roll out.
In terms of waste reduction, we've talked about a lot of the things that we have talked about in the subcommittee. The couple of new things, so we are working on signage, and so we should have something to come back to this group probably at the next meeting in terms of what we're proposing for signage on public trash and recycling containers. We are in the process of updating the city website as well as PSDS's website with recycling and other information. So we're going to be rolling that out. So we'll talk more about that at our next subcommittee meeting. We are moving forward with this pilot with the Cultural Center. So we did a little recycling experiment with them during the Cinema Diverse. They were able to collect up three cartfuls of recycling material, which they had never done before. So we're going to work with them more on getting some permanent containers installed there, as well as some other. We're looking at their reusables and their other disposable material that they use in their cafe. And then Gary talked about the visits to the non-compliant organization. So I think that's pretty much it.
Great, thank you. Standing Subcommittee on World Environment Day?
We're hopefully meeting next week.
Great. Thank you. Standing Subcommittee on Water Conservation.
Okay, really quickly, Commissioner Miller and I formed the committee. We had our first standing committee meeting earlier this month, We discussed with Patrick the city's turf removal projects, and we also discussed working with DWA on education and enforcement concerning sprinkler runoff, which is a violation of both the city's and DWA water waste rules. And we'll meet next month and we'll report back to work on our action plan for the rest of the fiscal year. Commissioner Miller joined me this morning at the DWA board meeting, and I introduced her and said, said, we're looking forward to working with the city and staff and DWA to focus on water conservation both in and by the city. And we've asked Ashley Metzger to join us for our next committee meeting early next month. DWA had an 11.5% reduction in potable water production in September. I'll save the details. You have it there, but it's a good number. And finally, at this morning's CWA board meeting, they reported the State Water Resources Control Board recently tested its wells for levels of PFAS, which we discussed. That's the forever chemical. The concern is that it might have seeped out because of the airport. That's a focus area. Good news is nothing in the Palm Springs wells, and they have to do some additional testing in Cat City for one well there. There's a good article in yesterday's LA Times that you can look to see where all of the problem wells are. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you. Ad hoc Subcommittee on Earth Day. Commissioner
The
Baker.
only thing I have, Mr. Noble wanted to know how many trees we planned on planting during that Earth Day event, and I didn't have a number for him.
I didn't know that we were planting
Oh,
trees
sorry.
during the Earth Day event, so the answer is we don't know.
Okay.
But you and I should
Need
meet
to talk.
in the next couple of weeks just to plan that out.
Okay.
Okay.
Question with tree planting, that's for us is getting into warm weather. So is that going to be actually good for actually starting a plant? So maybe that might be a question for the arborists and master gardeners? And then maybe if it's planted prior to that, and then the ceremony then could actually happen. But I think that might be a little bit late in the year to be starting a new plant out here.
Thank you. Ad hoc Subcommittee on Walkability and Pedestrian Planning.
So we should have responses back to our RFP to do the master plan in the next couple of weeks, I think, and then we're going to meet to review the proposals, I think, in the week of October 28th.
Thank you.
We meaning the SCAG staff and me and Joelle from engineering. So.
Ad hoc Subcommittee on Crosswalks and Pedestrian Safety. This is a new subcommittee that we formed last time. And we also, in addition to Commissioners Flanagan and Goins, we have Christine Hammond from Code Enforcement and Public Works, who's been involved in a lot of the hotspots projects in the past, both through that committee and Measure J. My intent was to have a discussion with it at the last Code Enforcement and Public Works Committee with Joel Montalvo, because I had a short conversation with him a few weeks ago, and he had some thoughts about how to go about that process, and there are certain requirements as to how you can, or where you can put crosswalks and so forth. So I thought having a conversation with him would be a good start, and then we would have a meeting. He was not available, so we didn't have that conversation. So I'd like to get together with him soon and then try to plan to have a meeting of that subcommittee probably before the next commission meeting. And Commissioner Goins to provide me with some information about a number of Measure J projects and their cost, which can help the committee in doing some planning. Okay. Ad hoc Subcommittee on Bicycle Routes and Cycling.
I met with Daniel earlier, and we started the application for the bike-friendly communities. It's would lead to more recognition funding. It's pretty in-depth, and it will take city resources to fill it out. A lot of it is really technical details that'll come from engineering. So I know Daniel's out for a couple of weeks, so it's kind of on hold for now. But
I did mention to him that there was recently a request from City Council to get all of the bike routes and mileage and all of that from engineering, and so they've already done that. So that might help us out.
Oh yeah,
a little
that'll
bit.
help significantly. So.
Thank you. Ad hoc Subcommittee on Night Sky.
Yeah, we just met again a second ago, and Robert and I think we're going to go with the route of some pre-existing brochures that we found from the International Dark Skies Association, and we want to disperse those under the city's name and format through 2PS1 and through neighborhood HOAs as the carrot, and we also want to follow up with I mentioned before, using similar legislation that City of Malibu is using for their dark skies ordinance as our stick. And Robert, I think, agrees that we need to start working on an ordinance.
Yeah, I think if we can get in on the ground floor, especially on a lot of the new construction that's going on here and the new facilities, with this brochure, then they will build this in, and they'll be, with the understanding that we're working towards an ordinance, so they're going to have to do it anyway. So the brochure, in other words, is a really good idea to get out now. That's it.
Thank you. Bighorn sheep habitat protection.
So Jim and I met with Jane to talk about a volunteer, and what was the other guy? David, yes, from the Parks and Rec Commission, to talk about a volunteer trail monitor system. And so we're in the process of collecting some feedback on that and how that would work, and figure out what kind of relationship that would be with the city, that would have with the city. As I mentioned earlier, we had that little glitch or hiccup with the ordinance for the no dogs on trail sign, but that should be smoothed out, I think, at the next commission meeting or council meeting. And we need to just repair one of the signs, and I was just waiting to do that till the ordinance stuff goes through. So
that's hasn't been repaired. I went by it, hasn't been repaired.
No,
yet,
it
right?
hasn't been repaired yet.
The other thing is, it's on I think it's on the Oswego Canyon site, it might refer to it, but if you're interested in being a ranger, you get a t-shirt, and there's some scheduling stuff that's already on there, and we're gonna do some training and some brochure giveaways that we've worked on. So check with me or look on the Facebook website for Oswego, and you can be led to. And I think what we're looking at is some of the bigger trails, to have somebody there for an hour or two in the morning with an official shirt and with some information that explains why we're doing what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Wellness?
This Saturday is both the tram race, anyone who wants to run up to the top of the hill, as well as Desert Regional's Wellness Fair and Desert AIDS Project AIDS Walk in Ruth Hardy Park.
And one item that was brought up a couple of months ago was alternatives to Roundup. Has there been any discussion about that?
Commissioner Coors already did that on his own.
He did?
Through the city council, through the maintenance.
Oh.
So they already pulled all the Roundup.
Okay, great.
It's no
Thank you.
longer being used in the
Okay,
city.
that was an easy resolution.
Question regarding Roundup, and I'm thrilled at that, but like with the styrofoam being at the retail, even if the businesses aren't using it, it's still in huge displays at Home Depot and places like that. It's shocking to me. I was poisoned. I have environmental sensitivity, and I started feeling dizzy. I realized I was standing in front of a display. I had to leave. I contacted their manager, and they were like, well, it's legal. And it was like, well, I will never shop there or enter there again. But it's, even though the city isn't using it and it's not being used in those facilities, people still buy it and are dousing, So it's, it's shocking to me that it's even allowed anywhere. It's in the same, it's malathion. I mean, it's as dangerous as that, if not worse. So why is it even allowed in the state of California, much
Because
less
it's
this
still
community?
legal.
I understand that, but that's the problem.
Well, the argument is, I did a lot of research on that, and the chemical companies still push back, and they have their research that says it doesn't cause any harm. So it's like an impasse right now. So you
right.
can't tell a manufacturer that they cannot sell something that's legal within the city.
I understand. It's Bayer Monsanto. This is a horrible conflict, and consider the source. I think we have to really get some teeth with this, because they're going to keep pushing back, just like, with these other lobbyists. They're very powerful, and they're in the poison business.
They're being sued by everyone. It's not that simple. They are definitely entrenched in their position that it's not dangerous.
And finally, Desert Community Energy Community Advisory Committee.
Our next meeting is this coming Thursday. We haven't had a meeting between the last meeting and this one, so we'll be presenting a report at that time, the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. And finally, the last item is commissioner comments and upcoming agenda development. We'll go around the table as we normally do. Before we do, I'd just like to remind everybody about the boards and commissions training, we received a notice from Terry Milton that's going to be on Monday, December 2nd, lunch at 11:15, and training from 12 to 2. So, Commissioner Goins, anything? Commissioner Futterman?
I went to the Wild and Scenic Film Festival in Riverside at the Fox. It was their third annual. Greg and I went last year, so it was a benefit for Inland Area Waterkeeper for their educational programs. They do environmental education for the river and preschool, and basically, in a nutshell, it's more of a friend maker than a money maker, the organizer said, but they did garner about $8,000 from sponsors, and so she made a lot of friends. But I think that we don't have any nature festivals here. We have so many other films. I'm still really interested in bringing this here and partnering, hopefully, with the Palm Springs Cultural Center. And they really want to work with UCR. So if we can't work with them, I think the Living Desert, it was presented to me years ago that they wanted to partner, with somebody, and maybe Rivers and Lands. So I'll get back to you next month with more information to
thank
save
you.
time.
Commissioner Garrett?
Ongoing, this weekend, the 17th and 18th, the Salton Sea meeting at UC Riverside. I don't know if I can attend, but I'm hoping that some of the commissioners can. And as you all know, if Salton Sea happens, everything else becomes moot. So it's rather important. And I'd also like to applaud the great state of California for leading, banning all new furs in the state. So vintage or existing ones, fine, but no more new furs, and hopefully we can continue that effort with exotic reptile skins and so on. There's no need for them, and it's quite horrible, really.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller? Nothing? Okay. Commissioner Baker? Commissioner Friedman?
Nothing else.
Commissioner Flanagan? Vice Chair McCann?
One more thing. So I'm gonna take this and put it up again, and I want you all to think of me morphing into Sally Field and Norma Ray, standing up on the table with waving this. Quick update, we're going into high gear on this. We have until December 31st. We've raised about $450,000, so we need to raise about $550 already. What can you commissioners do? There's several things. If you know privately of any donors that might have deep pockets that would be interested in this, please get in touch with me and we will get in touch with them. If you know anybody who has a nice house and would like to host a house party, we're still looking for house parties. And the third thing is that if you would like a lawn sign, get in touch with me and I will deliver one to your house.
Thank you. So it is now 7:14. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.